I was suffocating behind a machine when my sister unplugged my ventilator. "Stop being so dramatic, Maggie," Joanna hissed, her perfect French manicure reaching past the warning signs as she yanked the plug. "You always do this for attention." The alarm screamed. My chest stopped moving. The ventilator's rhythm that had been breathing for me, just gone. I tried to inhale, but my damaged lungs wouldn't obey. My hands clawed at the plastic tubing, my vision tunneling to a pinpoint of light, my body making sounds that didn't seem human, silent choking gasps that the machines amplified through their desperate beeping. My parents stood in the doorway, frozen. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father looked away at the floor. I reached toward them, fingers shaking, begging without words, "Help me, please, I'm your daughter too." Joanna stepped back, crossing her arms. "See? She's fine. Just being a drama queen like she's been since she was 19. What none of them knew, what would change everything they believed about who deserved what, was that every second was being recorded by the camera mounted in the corner. And 2 weeks later, at my grandmother's will reading, a doctor would press play on that footage and speak 7 words that shattered my sister's entire future. "The cameras recorded everything, Joanna. Everything. Have you ever been treated like an inconvenience by the people who should have protected you most?" Before I tell you how my grandmother planned her revenge from beyond the grave and what happened when that hospital footage played in front of my entire family, hit that subscribe button because this story gets so much darker before it gets better and you're not going to want to miss a single twist. I need to tell you how I became the invisible daughter, the one they wished they could forget but couldn't because machines don't let you disappear quietly. I was 19 when everything changed. A car accident on Route 9 during my sophomore year at State. A drunk driver ran a red light and my head hit the dashboard so hard it fractured my skull in 3 places. I spent 2 months in a coma. When I woke up, nothing worked right. My lungs had forgotten how to breathe on their own. The neurologist, Dr. Patterson, sat my parents down and used words like severe traumatic brain injury, chronic respiratory failure, ventilator-dependent, possibly permanent. My mother cried for 3 days, not because I'd survived, but because, as she told my Aunt Linda on the phone when she thought I couldn't hear, "How are we supposed to handle this? Tom's insurance barely covers it, and Margaret had such a bright future before this happened." Before this. Like I'd chosen to have my skull shattered. Like I'd decided to become the daughter who needed machines to stay alive. Joanna was 16 then, a sophomore in high school, already perfect, already everything I'd never been. She had my mother's delicate features, my father's charm. She played varsity tennis. She dated the quarterback. She got early acceptance to Princeton. My hospital bed got moved into what used to be the dining room because I couldn't manage stairs anymore. Joanna got my old bedroom, the bigger one with the bay window. She complained once, just once, that the sound of my ventilator at night made it hard for her to study for her SATs. My father soundproofed her door the next weekend. He never soundproofed mine. My grandmother Eleanor was the only one who looked at me and saw something other than broken. She'd sit beside my bed for hours reading me poetry, Sylvia Plath, Mary Oliver, women who'd survived their own kinds of suffocation. She'd brush my hair, braid it carefully around the ventilator tubing. She never flinched when the alarms went off, never acted like the machines were an imposition. One night when I was 22, when I'd just been rejected from 3 graduate programs because they couldn't accommodate my medical equipment, when I heard my mother tell someone at church that I was her cross to bear, Eleanor took my hand and said something I never forgot. "Margaret, listen to me. You're not a burden, you're a warrior. This world wasn't built for people like you, and you get up every single morning anyway. You earned a bachelor's degree while breathing through a machine. You're working at that nonprofit changing actual lives while your sister posts selfies and spends your parents' money. You think that's easy? You think that takes less strength?" She squeezed my fingers hard. "You're not living in the margins, sweetheart. You're rewriting what's possible. And one day everyone's going to see it." I held on to those words like a drowning person holds a rope. I needed to believe her. I needed to think that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the burden my family's tired sighs suggested I was. But then Eleanor died 6 months ago, and the only person who'd ever seen me as something more than medical equipment and invoices was gone. And that's when my lungs decided they were done fighting too. Eleanor died on a Tuesday morning in April, peacefully in her sleep, the way everyone hopes to go. Except I knew better. I knew because I'd talked to her the night before and she'd sounded off, breathless in a way that had nothing to do with age, her words slightly slurred when she told me she loved me, that I was her greatest pride. I should have called someone, should have driven over, should have done something. But I didn't. And by morning she was gone, and I had to live with that. The funeral was on Saturday at St. Michael's, the church where Eleanor had volunteered for 40 years, arranging flowers, teaching Sunday school, donating more money than anyone knew she had. The sanctuary was packed with people who loved her, who remembered her kindness, her sharp wit, her refusal to suffer fools. I sat in the front pew in my wheelchair, the portable ventilator humming beside me, a constant reminder that even at my grandmother's funeral I was the complication, the logistical problem. My mother had argued with the funeral director for 20 minutes about where to position me. She didn't want the ventilator visible in the family photos. Joanna sat between our parents wearing a black Chanel dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. I knew because she'd posted about it on Instagram the day before. Funeral ready, she'd captioned it with a broken heart emoji and a photo of herself looking devastatingly beautiful in grief. She cried elegantly during the service, delicate tears that didn't smudge her mascara. My mother held her hand. My father's arm wrapped around her shoulders. When I cried, when the grief actually broke something open inside my chest and I sobbed so hard the ventilator alarm started going off because my breathing pattern was irregular, my mother turned and gave me a look that said, "Not here, Margaret. Please, not here." At the reception at Eleanor's house, the house that smelled like lavender and old books, the house where I'd spent countless afternoons feeling safe, people kept approaching Joanna, offering condolences, telling her how sorry they were for her loss. Like she'd been the one sleeping at Eleanor's bedside during her chemotherapy 3 years ago. Like she'd been the one calling every morning to make sure Eleanor had taken her medications. I stood near the window watching my sister accept sympathy she hadn't earned, watching her perform grief like she performed everything else, beautifully, strategically, with an audience in mind. She found me there eventually, when most of the guests had left. She leaned against the wall beside my wheelchair, holding a glass of white wine, her third or fourth, I'd lost count. "You know," she said, her voice low, almost conversational, "Grandma Eleanor left everything to me. The house, the investments, all of it. Her lawyer called yesterday." I looked at her, my chest tight, not from my lungs, but from something deeper. "How do you know that, Margaret?" She smiled that perfect, practiced smile she'd been using since high school. "Because I'm the one who was actually here. I'm the one who didn't make her life complicated. I didn't require special accommodations or medical equipment or constant attention." She took a sip of wine. "You'll probably get some token amount, something small. But let's be honest, you don't need much anyway. You've got your disability checks, your nonprofit salary. You're used to living small." I wanted to scream, wanted to grab her perfect dress and shake her, wanted to tell her about the hours I'd spent with Eleanor, the real conversations we'd had, the plans she'd shared with me. But I didn't, because that's what I'd learned to do: survive quietly, don't make waves, don't be more difficult than you already are. Joanna pushed off from the wall, smoothing her dress. "Try not to be too dramatic about it, okay, Maggie? I know you're upset, but Grandma knew what she was doing." She walked away, leaving me there with my grief and my machines and the growing certainty that something about this wasn't right. Eleanor had promised me I was her warrior, had told me I was rewriting what's possible. And now Joanna expected me to believe she'd left me nothing, left me forgotten one more time? I didn't believe it. I couldn't. But I also didn't know how to fight. And 6 months later, when my lungs failed, when I ended up back in the ICU, when Joanna reached for that ventilator plug, I still didn't know that someone had been fighting for me all along. The pneumonia hit me like a truck 6 months after Eleanor's funeral. It started as a cold, nothing serious, just a cough and some congestion. But when your lungs are already compromised, when you're already dependent on a machine to breathe for you, a cold becomes a crisis. Within 3 days I couldn't maintain my oxygen saturation. The portable ventilator wasn't enough. My home care nurse Maria took one look at my vitals and called 911. I remember the paramedics lifting me into the ambulance, remember thinking, this is it. This is how it ends, and feeling almost relieved because I was so tired of fighting, so tired of being the burden everyone had to work around. They admitted me to the ICU at Mercy General, put me on full ventilator support, the kind where the machine does everything, where you're completely dependent on technology to keep you alive. My parents arrived 2 hours later. My mother's face was tight with that expression I knew so well, the one that said, "Here we go again." Another crisis, another hospital bill, another disruption to their lives. My father stood at the foot of my bed checking his phone, barely looking at the monitors, the nurses, the 4 lines snaking into my arms. "How long is this going to take?" he asked. Dr. Chen, my pulmonologist, a woman I'd been seeing for 5 years, a woman who'd kept me alive through 3 previous respiratory crises, looked at him with barely concealed disgust. "As long as it takes, Mr. Dean. Your daughter has severe pneumonia complicated by her existing condition. We're talking weeks, not days." My mother sighed, actually sighed, like I'd inconvenienced her on purpose. "Joanna has her gallery opening next weekend," she said. "We were supposed to go to New York. Can we leave Margaret here? I mean, she's stable, right? She has nurses." Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Dean, your daughter nearly died. She needs family support, not just medical staff." I watched my mother's face harden the way it always did when someone suggested she wasn't doing enough for me. "We'll visit when we can," she said. "We have lives too. Margaret understands that, don't you, sweetie?" She didn't wait for an answer. Joanna showed up on day 3 wearing designer athleisure like she'd just come from Pilates. She walked into my ICU room, looked at all the machines, the ventilator, the monitors, the 4 pulls, and wrinkled her nose. "God, Maggie, this is so extra." She pulled a chair close to my bed, too close, her perfume making my eyes water. "You know Mom and Dad are stressed, right? They're worried about you, but also, like, can you try to get better faster? This is really bad timing with everything going on." I couldn't respond, couldn't tell her that I wasn't choosing this, that I would give anything to breathe on my own, that her gallery opening meant nothing compared to my life. The ventilator tube down my throat made speech impossible, made me completely vulnerable, completely at the mercy of people who'd never shown me any. She leaned back, crossing her legs, looking at me with something like contempt. "You've always been like this, dramatic, attention-seeking. Remember when you were in that accident? Everyone said you'd recover, but you just stayed sick, stayed dependent. It's like you enjoy being the victim." She reached forward and I saw her hand moving toward the ventilator connection, saw her fingers wrap around the tubing. "Joanna, no," I tried to say, but nothing came out, just a muffled sound behind the tube. "Stop being so dramatic, Maggie," she hissed, and pulled. The ventilator disconnected. The alarm screaming immediately. My chest froze mid-breath. The machine that had been breathing for me, suddenly gone. My lungs, useless, damaged, unable to pull air on their own. I thrashed, my hands clawing at the tube, at empty air, at anything. My vision tunneling. My parents in the doorway, frozen, stupid, shocked. Joanna stepping back, arms crossed. "See? She's fine." And then Dr. Chen was there, shoving Joanna aside, reconnecting the ventilator, her hands fast, efficient, professional. "Breathe, Margaret. I've got you. Breathe." The air came back, painful, mechanical, life-saving. I could hear Dr. Chen shouting for security, could see the camera in the corner, its red light blinking, recording everything. Could feel my sister's eyes on me, wide now, realizing maybe for the first time that she'd just tried to kill me. And someone had seen it all. Dr. Chen came back 2 hours after security escorted Joanna out, after my parents left claiming they needed to process what happened, after the nurses stabilized my vitals and gave me sedatives to calm the panic still coursing through my body. She pulled a chair close to my bed, closer than professional distance usually allowed, and said, "Margaret, I need to tell you something. Your grandmother asked me to watch over you. She said it might come to this." I blinked at her, confused, the sedatives making everything feel underwater, slow and disconnected. Dr. Chen had been my pulmonologist for 5 years, but I'd never known she knew Eleanor, never knew there was any connection beyond the standard doctor-patient relationship. She must have seen the question in my eyes because she continued. "Eleanor was my patient too. Did you know that? She had COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Had it for years, managed it quietly the way she managed everything, with grace and stubbornness. She came to see me every 3 months like clockwork. And she talked about you, Margaret. Every single visit, she talked about you." My throat ached around the ventilator tube, tears burning hot behind my eyes. I wanted to ask why Eleanor had never told me, why she'd kept this secret. But Dr. Chen was already pulling something from her bag, a wooden box, small and worn, the kind Eleanor used to keep on her desk for important papers. "She left this with me 6 months ago, right before she died. She made me promise to give it to you if you ever ended up in critical care, if you ever needed someone to believe you." She placed the box on my lap, her hands gentle. Dr. Chen opened it for me because my hands were shaking too badly to manage the latch. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in Eleanor's careful script. Letters addressed to me that I'd never received. Letters dated over the past 15 years, one for every year since my accident. "Margaret, my warrior," one began. "You turned your trauma into purpose. Today I read that you're leading the accessibility initiative at Hope Harbor nonprofit. I bought 5 copies of the article. I'm so proud I could burst." There were newspaper clippings, articles about the programs I'd developed, the advocacy work I'd done, profiles in disability rights journals highlighting my contributions. Eleanor had collected all of it, every mention, every achievement, every proof that I mattered, that I was making a difference in the world. There was a letter from 3 years ago when I'd spoken at the state legislature about healthcare access. "Margaret, I watched you on C-SPAN," she wrote. "You were magnificent, eloquent, unafraid. Your parents didn't even know you were testifying, did they? But I knew. I'm always watching, sweetheart. Always believing in you." Dr. Chen's voice was soft when she spoke again. "Your grandmother came to see me 8 months ago, Margaret. 2 months before she died. She told me she was worried about your sister, about your parents, about what would happen to you after she was gone. She said Joanna had changed, had become desperate, that she'd been asking about the will constantly, pressuring Eleanor to make decisions. Eleanor was scared, Margaret. Scared that your family might hurt you, might see you as an obstacle to something they wanted. She made me promise that if you ever ended up in my ICU, I would protect you the way she couldn't anymore." I couldn't speak, couldn't process what this meant, that Eleanor had known, had seen the danger, had tried to build a safety net around me even from beyond the grave. Dr. Chen reached into the box and pulled out one final letter, this one sealed, this one marked to be opened only by Margaret in the presence of Dr. Sarah Chen. She handed it to me, helped me break the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was Eleanor's handwriting one last time. "Margaret, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. And I suspect things have gotten very bad. I suspect your sister has shown you who she really is. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it, but I made sure someone would see. I made sure you wouldn't be alone. There are things you need to know about the night I died, things that didn't feel right. Ask about the visitor logs. Ask who was with me when my oxygen alarm went off. Joanna came to see me that night, Margaret. She was alone with me for 17 minutes. And when she left, I couldn't breathe right. I changed my will the next morning. I wanted you to know that whatever happens, you were loved. You were seen. You were always, always enough. Can I just say, if you're still here listening to my story, thank you for seeing me the way Eleanor did. If this is resonating with you, if you've ever had someone fight for you when no one else would, drop a comment and let me know you're here. And hit that subscribe button, because you're exactly the kind of person I'm telling this story for. Dr. Chen watched me cry, watched me break apart in that hospital bed, and then she said, "There's something else, Margaret. Something I need to show you. And I think we need to talk to the respiratory therapist who was on duty the night your grandmother died. His name is James Cooper, and he's been waiting 6 months to tell someone what he saw." James Cooper arrived during the shift change, a tall man in his 40s with kind eyes and the careful demeanor of someone who'd seen too much death to take life lightly. Dr. Chen had texted him and he'd come immediately, still in his scrubs, his badge identifying him as a senior respiratory therapist, 15 years at Mercy General. He looked at me in that hospital bed, looked at the ventilator keeping me alive, and said, "I'm so glad you're okay, Miss Dean. When I saw what your sister did on the monitor, I ran." But Dr. Chen got there first. He pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. "I need to tell you something I should have said 6 months ago." Dr. Chen stood beside him, her arms crossed, her face grave. "Before James tells you what he saw, Margaret, I need you to understand something about your sister." She gestured for James to wait, pulled out her phone, and showed me a screenshot, financial records that she shouldn't have had but somehow did. "Your sister Joanna is $180,000 in debt. Credit cards, personal loans, a failed boutique business she funded with money she didn't have. She's drowning, Margaret. And drowning people do desperate things. Your grandmother's estate is worth approximately $1.2 million. The house alone is worth $600,000. Joanna needs that money. Needs it badly enough to," I watched the numbers blur on the screen. $180,000. Joanna, who wore Chanel, who vacationed in the Hamptons, who posted about luxury brunches and spa days. Joanna, who'd been so certain at the funeral that everything was hers, had been living a lie, performing wealth while suffocating under debt. That inheritance wasn't just money to her. It was survival. James cleared his throat, his hands clasped tight. "Margaret, I was on duty the night your grandmother died. April 7th. I remember because it was my daughter's birthday. I almost didn't come in, but we were short-staffed. Eleanor Hartwell was in room 304. Stable condition, COPD exacerbation, but responding well to treatment. She was supposed to go home the next day." He paused, his jaw working. "I was monitoring patients from the central station around 11 p.m. when I saw on the visitor log that someone had checked in to see her. Joanna Dean. Visiting hours were over, but she told the night nurse she was Eleanor's granddaughter, that it was urgent. The nurse let her in. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might trigger the monitors." James continued. "She was in there for 17 minutes. I watched the clock because something felt off about it, felt wrong. At 11:14 p.m., Eleanor's oxygen alarm went off, the sensor showing her levels dropping fast. I grabbed my equipment and ran to her room. When I got there, Joanna was standing by the bed, her hand near the oxygen line. Eleanor was gasping, turning blue. I immediately checked the connection and found it had been loosened, not disconnected completely, but enough that she wasn't getting adequate oxygen. I reconnected it properly. Eleanor's levels came back up. Joanna said she must have bumped it accidentally, that she was just adjusting her grandmother's pillow. Dr. Chen's voice was cold when she spoke. Eleanor called me the next morning at 6 a.m. She was terrified, Margaret. She told me Joanna had visited, had asked again about the will, had become agitated when Eleanor wouldn't give her details about the inheritance. Eleanor said she woke up unable to breathe, that she'd felt the oxygen line being touched. She wasn't sure if it was intentional, but she was scared. Scared enough to call her lawyer that same day. She changed her will that morning, Margaret. Cut Joanna out almost entirely. James nodded. I documented everything in my incident report, but Eleanor didn't want to pursue it. She said family matters were complicated, that she'd handle it. I've regretted that decision every day since, because 2 weeks later Eleanor was dead. She coded at home before the paramedics could reach her. Heart failure, they said. Complications from COPD. But I've always wondered. He looked at me directly, his eyes haunted. And then 6 months later, I'm watching the security monitor and I see Joanna Dean walk into your ICU room. I see her reach for your ventilator. And I know exactly what she's capable of. Dr. Chen placed her hand on my shoulder. This is why Eleanor asked me to protect you, Margaret. She knew Joanna was dangerous, knew she was desperate enough to remove obstacles. And that's what you are to her, an obstacle between her and $1.2 million. She tried once with Eleanor, got away with it. And she just tried again with you. But this time, Margaret, this time we have it all on camera. Every second, every word. And your grandmother's will reading is scheduled for next week. Joanna thinks she's won, thinks Eleanor left her everything. She has no idea what's coming. James leaned forward. Miss Dean, I have the security footage from tonight, and I have my incident report from the night your grandmother died. I'm willing to testify to all of it, willing to stand up in that lawyer's office and tell the truth, if you are. Because your sister shouldn't get away with this. She shouldn't profit from the people she's hurt. I looked at both of them, these strangers who'd become my protectors, who'd seen what my own family refused to see, and I nodded. Yes. Because Eleanor hadn't raised a victim. She'd raised a warrior. And it was time to fight back. My parents came back the next morning with Joanna trailing behind them, looking subdued, almost nervous. My mother's face was tight with barely controlled frustration. Margaret, we need to talk about your discharge, she said, not even sitting down, not even asking how I was feeling after my sister had tried to kill me. The doctors say you could be here for another week, maybe 2. But frankly, we think you're well enough to go home. You have your equipment there, you have your home care nurse. There's no reason to stay in the hospital racking up bills. My father nodded agreement, already pulling papers from his briefcase. We've talked to the billing department. Your insurance is only going to cover so much of this. ICU stays are expensive, Margaret. We need you to sign an AMA form, against medical advice. You'll be released this afternoon. We've already called Maria. She can take over your care. He slid the papers onto my bedside table, next to Eleanor's wooden box, next to the letters I'd been reading all night, the letters that told me I was worth more than convenience, more than cost savings, more than their comfort. Joanna stood behind them, silent for once, her eyes flicking to the camera in the corner, the camera she now knew had recorded everything. Dr. Chen had made sure my family knew about the footage, had made sure they understood security had it all preserved. Joanna looked smaller somehow, diminished, her perfect armor cracked. But my parents, they were still performing, still pretending that what happened was an accident, a misunderstanding, still prioritizing money and image over the fact that their youngest daughter had unplugged their oldest daughter's life support. I looked at the AMA form, looked at my father's expensive pen held out to me expectantly, and for the first time in my entire life, I said no. The word came out rough around the ventilator tube, barely audible, but it was there, solid, unmovable. No. My mother blinked. Margaret, be reasonable. You can recover just as well at home. This is costing us. I shook my head, reached for the call button, pressed it until a nurse appeared. My parents started talking over each other, explaining that I was being difficult, that I needed to understand the financial reality, that I was being selfish as always, thinking only of myself. The nurse, a woman named Patricia who'd been taking care of me for 3 days, looked at my parents with professional coldness. Mr. and Mrs. Dean, your daughter is a competent adult. She has the right to refuse discharge if she feels unsafe leaving. She looked at me, squeezed my hand. Do you want to stay, Margaret? Do you feel you need continued hospital care? I nodded, yes, emphatically yes. Patricia turned back to my parents. Then she's staying. You're welcome to visit during appropriate hours, but medical decisions are hers to make, not yours. I suggest you respect that. My father's face turned red. You're making a mistake, Margaret. This is going to cost you in more ways than one. My mother grabbed his arm. Stephen, let's go. She can be stubborn. Let her deal with the consequences. They left, Joanna hesitating in the doorway, looking back at me with something I couldn't quite read, fear maybe, or calculation, wondering what I knew, what I was planning. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it and followed our parents out. Patricia helped me sit up more comfortably, adjusted my pillows, checked my vitals. You did good, she said quietly. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially with family. But you deserve proper care. You deserve to heal. She left me alone with Eleanor's letters, and I picked up the one I'd read 5 times already, the one dated just 3 weeks before she died. Margaret, my brave girl. I know your family makes you feel small, makes you question your worth, makes you think that taking up space is a sin. But listen to me. You have a courageous heart. You've survived things that would have broken people with twice the support. You've built a career helping others while your own family barely acknowledges you exist. That takes strength most people will never understand. You don't owe them your silence anymore. You don't owe them your smallness. When I'm gone, and I know I won't be here much longer, I need you to promise me something. Fight back. Stop accommodating. Stop shrinking. Stop letting them treat you like you're less than human. You're not a burden, Margaret. You're a force. And it's time you showed them what that means. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the box. The will reading was in 5 days. 5 days until Joanna's certainty shattered. 5 days until my parents' comfortable narrative collapsed. 5 days until everyone saw what Eleanor had seen all along, that I wasn't invisible, that I had never been invisible. I had just been surrounded by people who refused to look. Dr. Chen had the footage. James Cooper had his testimony. Eleanor had changed her will, had left a trail of breadcrumbs that led straight to the truth. And I finally had something I'd never had before. The courage to let them see me. The strength to stop apologizing for surviving. The determination to breathe on my own terms. I pressed the button to recline my bed, closed my eyes, and let the ventilator do its work. 5 more days, I told Eleanor silently. 5 more days, and then we show them who I really am. The law office of Patterson and Associates was on the 3rd floor of a building with no elevator accessibility. I'd called ahead, made sure they knew I was coming, made sure they understood I needed accommodation. They'd arranged for us to meet in a 1st-floor conference room instead, the kind with a long mahogany table and leather chairs and windows overlooking the street. Dr. Chen pushed my wheelchair. James Cooper walked beside us carrying a laptop and a folder thick with documents. We arrived 10 minutes early. Eleanor had requested their presence in her will, had specifically named them as witnesses to be present at the reading. My family didn't know that yet. My parents were already seated. My father checking his phone. My mother adjusting her pearl necklace, the one Eleanor had given her 30 years ago. Joanna sat between them wearing cream-colored silk, looking confident, almost bored. She'd dressed for victory, for the moment she'd been waiting 6 months to claim. When she saw Dr. Chen and James, her face flickered, confusion, then something darker. Fear maybe, or anger. What are they doing here? She asked, her voice sharp. They're not family. The lawyer, Martin Patterson, a man in his 70s with silver hair and Eleanor's same sharp eyes, looked up from his papers. They're here at Mrs. Hartwell's explicit request as witnesses to this proceeding. He gestured to the empty chairs. Please, everyone, sit. We have significant ground to cover. My mother frowned. Witnesses for what? This is a simple will reading, Martin. It's family business. Mr. Patterson's expression didn't change. Mrs. Dean, your mother-in-law's will is quite detailed, and she had specific reasons for requesting these witnesses. Shall we begin? He opened the file in front of him, read the standard legal language about sound mind and body, about assets and beneficiaries. And then he got to the heart of it. To my daughter Laura Dean and son-in-law Stephen Dean, I leave the sum of $50,000 each, to be used as they see fit. This is substantially less than they may have expected, but it reflects their treatment of my granddaughter Margaret over the past 15 years. I've watched them fail her repeatedly, and I will not reward that failure. My mother's face went white. 50,000? That's it, Stephen? Our inheritance? Mr. Patterson continued reading, his voice steady. To my granddaughter Joanna Dean, I leave the sum of $1 and the following statement. Joanna, you had every advantage, every opportunity, every ounce of love and attention this family could provide. And you chose cruelty. You chose selfishness. You chose to see your sister as an obstacle rather than a person. I hope one day you understand what you've lost. The room went silent. Joanna's face cycling through emotions, shock, rage, disbelief. $1, she whispered. This isn't possible. Grandma promised me. She said I was her favorite. She said. Mr. Patterson looked at her over his reading glasses. Did she? Or did you assume that? Because assumption and entitlement seem to be family traits. He turned to the next page. To my granddaughter Margaret Dean, I leave the remainder of my estate, including my home at 847 Lakeside Drive, my investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $1.1 million, my collection of handwritten journals, and my eternal love and pride. Margaret, you are my warrior, my greatest joy, the one who turned suffering into strength. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better, but I tried to leave you the tools to protect yourself. Joanna stood up so fast her chair fell backward. This is insane. She left everything to Margaret? To the one who's been a burden her entire adult life? Who costs money, who needs constant care? This has to be challenged. There's no way, Mr. Patterson's voice cut through her rage. Sit down, Miss Dean. We're not finished. Dr. Chen, if you would? Dr. Chen opened James's laptop, turned it toward the table, and pressed play. The security footage from my ICU room filled the screen, grainy but clear, timestamp visible in the corner. There was Joanna walking in, leaning over my bed, reaching for the ventilator connection. Her voice caught on audio. Stop being so dramatic, Maggie. You always do this for attention. And then her hand, yanking the plug. The alarm screaming. My body thrashing. Dr. Chen rushing in. My parents frozen in the doorway. The footage played for 90 seconds that felt like hours. When it ended, Dr. Chen's voice was quiet, cold, controlled. The cameras recorded everything, Joanna. Everything. You said, everything you did. The hospital has preserved this footage and filed an incident report. Attempted harm to a patient in critical care is a serious crime. My father found his voice. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Joanna would never. James Cooper spoke for the first time, his voice steady with the authority of 15 years of experience. I witnessed this assault in real time, Mr. Dean. I was monitoring from the central station. I saw your daughter deliberately disconnect life-supporting equipment from her sister who was in acute respiratory failure. That's not a misunderstanding. That's attempted murder. And it's not the first time. He opened his folder, pulled out documents. 6 months ago, on April 7th, I responded to an oxygen alarm in Eleanor Hartwell's room. Found her oxygen line loosened to the point of inadequacy. Joanna Dean had been alone with her for 17 minutes. Eleanor Hartwell changed her will the next morning. She called Dr. Chen that same day and said she feared for her life. Joanna's face had gone from red to white, her hands shaking. This is ridiculous. You can't prove, you're trying to frame me because, she turned to me, eyes wild. Because she poisoned Grandma against me. Turned her against her own family. Dr. Chen stood up slowly, deliberately, walked to where Joanna was standing. Eleanor Hartwell was my patient for 3 years. She talked about Margaret constantly, with pride, with love, with concern. She never mentioned you, Joanna. Not once. Except at the end. Except when she was afraid. She looked at my parents, at their shocked faces, at the inheritance they'd assumed was secure. Your mother knew exactly who her granddaughters were. And she made her choice accordingly. Mr. Patterson closed the file. The will stands as written. Any contest will be expensive, lengthy, and given the evidence presented here today, unlikely to succeed. He looked at me. Margaret, when you're ready, there are additional documents your grandmother left for you, including the deed to the lakeside property and a letter she recorded specifically for this moment. Would you like to see it now? I nodded. Yes. And for the first time since I was 19, I watched my family realize I wasn't invisible anymore. I was just done being seen by people who'd never learned how to look. Mr. Patterson set up a small screen at the head of the table, his movements careful, deliberate, like he was handling something sacred. Your grandmother recorded this 2 days before she died, he said softly. She was very specific about when you should see it, only after the will was read, only with your family present. He pressed play, and Eleanor's face filled the screen. Thinner than I remembered, her skin papery, her eyes still bright, still fierce, still completely and utterly focused on me. Margaret, my darling girl. If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And I suspect the reading didn't go the way your sister expected. She smiled, a ghost of her old mischief. I'm not sorry about that. I'm sorry I can't be there to see her face, but I'm not sorry for the choice I made. You've spent your whole life being told you're too much, too complicated, too expensive, too difficult. And I've watched you shrink yourself trying to fit into a family that never deserved you. Her voice wavered but held strong. I want you to understand something, Margaret. Your disability didn't make you less. It revealed who everyone truly was. Your parents showed you they valued comfort over compassion. Joanna showed you she valued appearance over substance. But you, my brave girl, you showed the world that strength doesn't look like they taught us. It looks like getting up every day when your body fights against you. It looks like building a career helping others while your own family barely acknowledges your existence. It looks like choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes wet. The lakeside cottage is yours, Margaret. The one where we spent those summers when you were in college, where you told me you felt most free. It's fully accessible. I had it renovated last year, ramps, wide doorways, roll-in shower. I wanted you to have a place where the world fits you instead of you having to fit the world. There's also a trust fund specifically for your medical needs. $800,000, managed by a disability rights attorney I trust. She can't touch it, Margaret. Your parents can't touch it. Joanna can't touch it. It's yours, protected forever, so you never have to choose between your health and your independence. I was crying openly now, not caring that my family could see. Dr. Chen's hand on my shoulder, steady, grounding. Eleanor continued. I know you, Margaret. I know you'll want to be gracious. You'll want to let this go. You'll want to choose peace over justice. And that's your right, my love. That's your choice to make. But please, please promise me this, you'll never let them back in. You'll never give them another chance to make you feel small. You're worth so much more than their approval. You always were. She touched the screen like she could reach through time and space to hold me one more time. Be free, Margaret. Be loud. Be unapologetically yourself. The world needs your voice, needs your story, needs to see what survival really looks like. I love you, warrior girl. I always did. The screen went black. The silence in the room was deafening. Joanna was crying, angry tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. My mother sat frozen. My father staring at the table like answers might be written in the wood grain. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. The trust fund is active immediately, Margaret. The cottage deed will transfer within 30 days. Your grandmother also left instructions for her attorney to assist you with any legal matters that might arise from today's revelations. He paused, looked at Joanna specifically. That includes potential criminal charges for the incident at Mercy General Hospital, if you choose to pursue them. I looked at my sister, at this woman who'd shared my childhood, who'd gotten everything I'd ever wanted and still thought I had too much. She looked back at me, and I saw it, finally, really saw it. She wasn't strong or confident or superior. She was drowning, desperate, terrified of being invisible herself, of losing the pedestal our parents had built for her. And when she'd seen me as a threat, she'd tried to erase me the way she'd been erasing me our whole lives. But I wasn't erasable. Not anymore. I won't press charges, I said, my voice rough but clear. Everyone's head snapped toward me. Dr. Chen started to protest. Margaret, you should, Joanna tried to speak. I know, I interrupted, looking only at my sister. I know exactly what you did. I know what you are. And I'm choosing not to destroy you the way you tried to destroy me. Not because you deserve my mercy, but because I deserve my peace. I looked at my parents, who'd enabled this, who'd created the conditions where their daughter could become someone capable of murder. You failed me. You both failed me for 15 years. And I'm done trying to earn love from people who don't know how to give it. I turned to Mr. Patterson. When can I move into the cottage? He smiled. Within the week, if you'd like. I'll have everything arranged. I nodded. Then we're finished here. I looked at my family one last time. Don't contact me. Don't visit. Don't send letters or cards or explanations. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm not interested in reconciliation. I'm just done. And I left them there in that conference room with their shock and their $50,000 and their $1 and the daughter they'd created who'd almost become a murderer. And I wheeled myself out into the sunlight with Dr. Chen and James beside me and Eleanor's voice still echoing in my head, "Be free, Margaret. Be free." My parents showed up at the hospital 3 days later, one final attempt to salvage something, to explain or justify or minimize what they'd allowed to happen. My mother held flowers, grocery store carnations, cheap and wilting. My father carried his briefcase like this was a business negotiation, like we could find compromise in the wreckage of 34 years. Margaret, sweetheart, my mother started, can we please talk about this? We're still your parents. We still love you. We made mistakes, but every family has problems. Every family has misunderstandings. I let her finish, let her use all the words that meant nothing, words that had never protected me, never advocated for me, never once put my needs above their comfort. Then I said, you stood in my doorway and watched her unplug my ventilator. The silence was immediate, total. My father opened his mouth, closed it. My mother's face crumpled. But I kept going. You watched me suffocate. You watched me claw at air. You watched me dying. And you did nothing. You didn't stop her. You didn't call for help. You just stood there like I was an inconvenience you were waiting to end. That's not, my father tried. We were in shock. We didn't understand what was happening, you understood perfectly, I said, and my voice didn't shake, didn't break, stayed clear and strong the way Eleanor had promised it could be. You understood that your daughter, the one you've resented since I was 19, the one whose medical bills and equipment and needs have complicated your lives for 15 years, was potentially dying. And you felt relief, didn't you? Just for a second, you felt like maybe this would solve your problem. My mother gasped. Margaret, how can you, that's not, we never wanted. You never wanted me, I interrupted. Not like this. Not disabled, not dependent, not difficult. You wanted the daughter I was before the accident. The one who was easy, who didn't need machines, who didn't require accommodations, who didn't remind you every single day that life isn't fair. I became evidence of randomness, of vulnerability, of the fact that perfect families are a lie. And you couldn't forgive me for that. So you poured everything into Joanna instead, made her your centerpiece, your success story. And when she tried to kill me, twice, you're still here making excuses, still asking me to understand, still prioritizing your comfort over my survival. My father's voice was quiet, defeated. What do you want from us, Margaret? What can we possibly do to fix this? Nothing, I said. Because you can't fix 15 years of emotional abandonment. You can't fix the fact that you made me believe I was a burden. You can't fix standing by while Joanna became someone capable of murder because you taught her I didn't matter. You enabled that. You created the conditions for it. And I'm done paying the price for your failures as parents. I looked at both of them, these people who were supposed to protect me, who'd done everything but. Eleanor left me enough money to never need you again. She left me a home where I can finally breathe. She left me the validation you never gave and the freedom to cut you out of my life permanently. So that's what I'm doing. This is goodbye. Don't contact me. Don't come to the cottage. Don't send birthday cards or Christmas presents. Don't tell people you have 2 daughters. You have one, the one you chose 15 years ago. Live with that choice. If you made it this far with me, if you witnessed me finding my voice after 3 decades of silence, then you're part of this journey now. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what you would say to your younger self who felt invisible, because I read every single one and your stories matter just as much as mine. They left without another word. My mother crying, my father's hand on her back guiding her out. And I felt nothing, no guilt, no sadness, no regret. Just relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for decades and finally could exhale. I moved into the lakeside cottage 2 weeks later, and it was everything Eleanor had promised. Wide doorways that accommodated my wheelchair without squeezing. Ramps instead of stairs. A bathroom where I could shower independently for the first time in years. Windows that looked out over water and trees and sky that went on forever. Maria, my home care nurse, helped me settle in, brought groceries, set up my medical equipment in the spare bedroom that Eleanor had converted into a fully equipped care space. She looked around, tears in her eyes, and said, "Your grandmother really loved you, Margaret. You can feel it in every corner of this place." I could. Eleanor was in the accessible kitchen she'd installed, in the books arranged at wheelchair height, in the deck outside with its smooth surface and safety railings, in the peace that settled over me like a blanket. I was home. Really home. For the first time since I was 19. I spent the first month healing physically and emotionally, reading Eleanor's journals, learning about her life, her struggles, her fierce advocacy for me that she'd kept private. Dr. Chin visited twice, brought dinner, stayed to talk about Eleanor, about medicine, about what it meant to witness suffering and choose action. James Cooper sent a card with his daughter's drawing on it, thanking me for being brave. Even the nurses from Mercy General reached out, saying my story had changed how they thought about family dynamics, about patient advocacy, about believing people when they said they weren't safe. 3 months after the will reading, I launched the podcast Eleanor had unknowingly prepared me for. I called it Breathing Room, conversations with disability advocates about survival, resilience, and rewriting the narratives that try to erase us. The first episode was my story, the ventilator, the assault, the inheritance, the choice to prioritize healing over revenge. Within a week it had 50,000 downloads. Within a month I was getting messages from people all over the country, people who'd been made invisible by their families, their communities, their own internalized ableism. People who needed to hear that they weren't burdens, that they were warriors, that their lives had value exactly as they were. 6 months after moving to the cottage, I got an email from the National Disability Rights Coalition. They wanted to feature my story in their annual report, wanted me to speak at their conference, wanted to amplify my voice to legislators, advocates, families who needed to understand what systemic ableism looked like in intimate spaces. I said yes. Because Eleanor had raised me to say yes to opportunities, to claim space, to refuse invisibility. I spoke to an audience of 2,000 people, told them about the sister who unplugged my ventilator, about the parents who watched, about the grandmother who'd seen me when no one else would. And about choosing, every single day, to believe I deserved to breathe. The podcast grew, became something bigger than I'd imagined. Other disabled advocates joined me as co-hosts. We talked about medical trauma, about inaccessible spaces, about the violence of low expectations. About joy and sexuality and ambition within disability. About refusing to be inspiration porn or tragedy porn. About just being fully, complex, human. I got invited to write articles, to consult on accessibility initiatives, to train healthcare providers on patient advocacy. Eleanor had been right all along. I wasn't living in the margins. I was redefining what the center could hold. I never heard from my parents again. Never heard from Joanna, though I knew from mutual acquaintances that she'd moved across the country, that her debt had destroyed her, that she'd lost the life she'd been performing for so long. Sometimes I wondered if she understood what she'd done, if she'd ever looked at that security footage and seen herself clearly, seen the moment she became someone capable of erasing another person's life. But mostly I didn't think about her at all. I was too busy living the life Eleanor had given me, the life I'd fought for, the life I finally believed I deserved. I was breathing on my own terms. And the air had never tasted sweeter.